A government consultation ends today on whether there should be a legal change to the way gender is recognised in England and Wales. One option is to allow trans people to self-identify. Yesterday, we heard from a group of feminists who are opposed to that idea. In a moment, we'll be joined by the academic Kathleen Stock. But first, Elizabeth Glinker talks to trans people who are hoping for a change in the law.
You know, for me, I just identify as a woman, you know, and that a trans is just a label. And so I think that if we could all just identify as how we want to be, I think it would just make life so simple. Hey guys, it's me Drew, so I'm back with another video.
Drew Ashlyn Cunningham is a makeup artist, vlogger and model. She's also a trans woman.
I'd always kind of known from like a really young age that there was something different. I guess when I got to about 8 years old, like, you know, I get called gay all the time. And I think as I got older, I started to question more about myself and I was like, I want to be a woman.
Drew is one of up to 500,000 trans people living in the UK.
I kind of like knew for definite about the age of 14, 15. So then obviously that led to me like going to counselling and seeing like a psychologist and being referred to like a gender clinic. And then I kind of got the ball rolling. So while I was waiting to be seen by the gender clinic, I just started living as a girl.
Since the Gender Recognition Act of 2004, people have been able to legally change their gender. But groups like Stonewall say the process of obtaining an official gender recognition certificate, which requires rigorous medical assessments, is long, demeaning and costly. In the last 14 years, only 4,910 people have done it.
Do you have a gender recognition certificate?
No, I don't.
Why is that?
I guess like just changing my name and changing my documents was more than enough for me. I don't understand why it is so difficult to get a gender recognition certificate or just to be seen as the person that you want to be.
We've set out plans to reform the Gender Recognition Act because being trans is not an illness and it shouldn't be treated as such.
And this summer, as promised, the government launched a consultation on making it easier to self-identify. It's a proposal which has enraged some feminists.
Some women who are opposed to the idea of self-identification say that it could actually threaten women's rights, that it would mean that we couldn't have women-only spaces anymore. What would you say to that?
I would feel a bit upset if I wasn't included in a women's space because I don't identify as anything else, and I don't think you could put me in that label of she looks more like a man. You know, I think I look more like a woman, and you know, the way I think to me is more like a woman. It would be nice one day if we can all be, you know, equal.
Drew's been a makeup artist for around 8 years. Denver is one of her best clients.
I'm just using like an orange tone because it'll really help like make her eyes stand out.
Denver, did you always know that Drew was trans?
It's never really even crossed my mind, really. Drew was just Drew.
Makeup it's like a mask, you know.
Do you think so? Is that
Yeah.
how you think about it?
Makeup can enhance you, but I think for me it is a mask because I'm hiding like, you know, who I am behind it, if that makes sense. And I feel like people will view me differently because they'll see something, you know, that I want them to see.
So how do you feel about the women who still don't consider you to be a woman?
I think everybody is entitled to their own opinion. If someone doesn't want to see me as a woman, they're entitled to that, but I don't want someone to bring that negativity onto my life. I mean, it upsets me anyway because all I want is to just be seen as normal.
Like many trans women, Drew says on a day-to-day basis, she and her friend Natalia are accepted as women.
Oh, is this you?
Yes, that was me before. So they did like my nose.
They already use women's changing rooms, women's loos.
The main topic that does come up is the bathroom.
Yeah.
If you're making it such an issue, that's your own insecurity.
Imagine us just walking into like a male bathroom. You know, it would be so awkward. Who's the one in danger there?
Trans activists say on the ground, updating the Gender Recognition Act would bring few practical differences, but it would be fairer to a minority who face daily discrimination.
We've accepted, you know, LGBT rights, but I think the T is kind of left out. Feminism is all about equality. For people who aren't fighting for the T community, it just goes to show that maybe they're not a true feminist. You know, everyone thinks it's all about equality for women, but it's actually equality for everybody.
Kathleen, feminists have long argued for a breakdown in gender and to try and break down traditional gender roles. Haven't you, to a certain extent, repudiated the traditional idea of womanhood? And why shouldn't trans women embrace it?
Well, feminists have made a distinction between sex and gender, and some feminists think gender is a social construct. But that's a construct that's placed upon one in virtue of being perceived to be female. It's not something that's a feeling or something that you can choose to have a certain construction placed on you or not. And the worry about the proposals that are being potentially brought in is that it's allegedly making gender maybe a feeling, maybe not. We don't know. As Stonewall say, just an administrative matter. So really we won't be able to have any idea why people want to legally change their sex, and that's very worrying for females in particular, I think.
Why is it worrying? I mean, when you watch that film and you look at those trans women and the experiences that they've had, do you have sympathy for them?
Yes, of course I do. I have sympathy for all sorts of people in society, but this is the law, and I'm just against a law which kind of makes feelings something concrete because they're transitory quite often, and we think that this has implications for the construction of social spaces, for children. So there's all sorts of complicated things to be thought out. And it's not just about bathrooms, by the way. I mean, really, the focus on bathrooms is a bit of a distraction because we need to think about prisons, hostels, places where people are vulnerable, where they undress, where they sleep. This is not to say, absolutely not to say, that all trans women are predators, or even a large number, I mean, tiny numbers, but that's enough. I mean, that's enough to make it a big risk if we effectively move to unisex societies, as might happen if we bring in self-ID.
Right, but we are talking about state recognition of identity or gender in this case. And are you saying that these women, these trans women, don't have a right, then, to identify? You're questioning their identity. When you look at them and when viewers will look at those women, as they said, it would be very strange to see them going to a men's toilet, wouldn't it?
Yes, and, I mean, I think most of the feminists I know are happy with the status quo, which involves transsexuals, as originally conceived under the original Gender Recognition Act, who've made a meaningful transition involving a medical process. They're happy for that to continue, but that's not the state of affairs that we seem to be moving towards, because they're taking the medicalisation out of it. There's nothing meaningful about transition anymore,
We had a case recently with a man who self-identified as a woman in a jail, who was sent to a female jail, and he sexually assaulted 4 women. I mean, that is what you're talking about. Now, I think most people would look at the people on our film and think they look like great people and they seem very happy, but there's always going to be...
But predatory males
these predatory males, exactly. So you have to, you can't open the floodgates to that.
Well, will it be opening the floodgates?
No, I think that this is really, really overstaying that. I'm also a feminist and in full support of the changes that are hopefully going to be made. But as it stands right now, the process for trans men and women and non-binary people is costly, it's humiliating, it's a lot of bureaucracy. So what this is going to do is it doesn't change the definition of what a woman is. Actually, the 2004 Gender Recognition Act already meant that if you are able to get this gender recognition certificate, you can be classed as a woman or a man, regardless of surgery. This also doesn't change the Equalities Act, so around these women's only spaces, it doesn't change that. What this does is it gives trans men and women and non-binary people an easier route to be able to change their gender, and I think that is helpful for a lot of people. So I really don't buy these arguments.
Why should it be so difficult, Kathleen? Why should trans men and women have to go through what Maya describes as a humiliating, and it will be traumatic process? If they know they're a woman or they know they're a man, then why isn't that enough?
Well, it's got to be a serious procedure associated with a serious change. You get your legal sex changed on your birth certificate. And just to pick up on what Maya's saying, the Equality Act interacts with the Gender Recognition Act in substantial ways and in very confused ways as the legislation stands. So gender reassignment at various points is conceived of as legally changing sex. Sex is a protected characteristic. Gender reassignment is a protected characteristic. So the interaction of those barristers don't understand, legal theories at university don't understand, is there's no precedent in law to test that out, and women's sector organisations are frightened to test that out.
But not all women's sector organisations are saying this. If you look at Scottish Women's Aid, they're actually saying, I think that
they're scared of the trans lobby.
I think that
they are frightened.
Let my respond.
This very language of the trans lobby is itself stigmatising and dehumanising, and is totally overstating what is happening here.
But do they not have a right?
This is marginalised people trying to make their voices heard and get basic justice, and you're positioning it as if it is some shadowy lobby that is bullying women. And a lot of women like myself are supportive of trans women and men.
Not at all.
And it's not just about trans women, it's about trans men too and non-binary people.
It's about people generally.
Exactly.
It's about people. It's exactly about people.
It's also about women.
People have been self-identifying for thousands of years. You can go back to the Roman times or even to Egyptian times.
Debatable. There's a cultural construction on that is historically debatable.
All we're doing now is just sticking labels on things that don't need to be there.
Trans people is a modern phenomenon. There were not trans people in Roman times. It's a completely modern phenomenon.
Or did it not have a label?
There were eunuchs. Maybe that's what you're referring to. That's
in an
different. That's not
academic,
a
I believe in
trans person.
proper distinctions between things. If we put everything under the so-called trans umbrella,
don't all talk at the same time. Sarah, yes.
All I would say is I have no problem with anyone describing themselves as they feel. But what I don't think is right, and I think this is where perhaps you come in, is for you to have a situation with a female prison where there is a person who is self-identified as a female who does not have the right or good intentions and is clearly only doing it.
And that is frightening, isn't it, Maya?
So the reason we have all this legislation in place to make it, as you say, slightly more difficult to actually take these steps is to make sure that people who do change their sex absolutely want to do it.
All right, final. I've got to have a final because we're running out of...